From the Kansas City Sports Update Studio, this is the Richard Smith Show, where we talk about all things Kansas City Chiefs, brought to you by Arrowhead-update. Check us out on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Spreaker, CastBox, YouTube, Player FM, and all third-party applications. Check out the Richard Smith Show on Facebook platforms such as Arrowhead Update and Kansas City Sports Update. And if you cannot find us there, just Google or search The Richard Smith Show and Kansas City Chiefs, and I promise you will find us. How we doing, Chiefs Kingdom? It is Saturday, June 15th, and there's some news that we want to talk about here today on The Richard Smith Show. And the segment is the Everything a Chiefs fan should know about Brett-Veach. And with me today, again and always, our senior NFL analyst, kris-Chavez. How are we doing today, Chris?
I'm doing fantastic, bud. Yourself?
Hey, not bad. How's the weekend going? Anything newsworthy for you?
Fantastic, nice and relaxed. Just kind of catching up on some more Chiefs news, and that's about it, man.
Hey, good deal. Can't argue with that. And same here. I've really been honing in on Brett-Veach here, and we're going to jump right into everything we should know about Brett-Veach because it's an important part of the Chiefs puzzle. And there seems to be a lot of criticism surrounding Brett-Veach for whatever reason. I'm not quite sure. But Chris, let's start back at the very beginning with Brett-Veach. Let's tell Chiefs Kingdom about where Brett-Veach came from, his role as a football athlete in high school. Kick off with that.
Okay, so way back in high school, Brett-Veach was a star running back in Pennsylvania, and he ended up going to the University of Delaware to continue his football career. While he was there, from 98 to 2001, he played running back, wide receiver, and was also a return specialist. He was also teammates with another name who a lot of Chiefs Nation is going to know, in Matt Nagy, who was his quarterback. And I'll come back to that one because there's some more information there too. After 2001, Veach stayed at the University of Delaware, kind of like an assistant coach sort of deal, helping out with the team. And a lot of the other coaches on the team ended up recommending that he go out for this internship with the Eagles.
Hold on, before you go on, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but I can't let you just take off on Brett-Veach and run down his whole career. I got to have some input here on his career.
Okay, go for it.
Look, with Brett-Veach in high school, as a running back, his senior year, this is a man who rushed for 2,163 yards and 26 touchdowns and was named the Associated Press Small School Player of the Year in 1996. So Brett-Veach's football knowledge is way past, just sitting behind the desk as a GM or, traveling the country as a scout. I'm really interested in this Matt Nagy and Brett-Veach pairing up when they did. Take off a little bit more in depth on this Matt Nagy deal, because I think that's kind of a staple as to what happened, with him coming to the Chiefs and, reuniting with Andy Reid.
Okay, so in 2009, Veach kind of spoke up for Matt Nagy and got him a position with the Eagles. And he was with the Eagles and Veach all the way up until the point where Veach and Andy Reid headed to Kansas City in 2013. They brought Matt Nagy over with them. And then Nagy was with them up until, 2 years ago. Well, 2 years ago now, when Chicago ended up taking him away from us.
And hey, and also, with that being said, once Brett-Veach, joined the Philadelphia Eagles and had his first scouting year with the Eagles, he scouted Fletcher Cox. That was his first major scout in the NFL. And to me, that's a pretty good way to get your feet wet,
I hate to correct you on this one, dude, but there was somebody who beat him before Fletcher Cox.
Oh, who was it?
Okay, so while he was in Philly in 2008, Reed tasked Veach with finding the best wide receiver to select in the draft. And Veach found his man in Deshaun Jackson from the University of California.
Dang it, that's right. I knew that. What am I thinking?
And Jackson performed so well that's actually what allowed Veach to start getting more and more trust. Well, actually, there was a lot of trust already established there, but gained the respect of Reed and trust as far as identifying talent in players.
And that's a great way. And then following it up with Fletcher Cox. I stand corrected, but Chris, that's why we got you, man. That's why we got you here. Yep. This guy is a encyclopedia of football knowledge. So look, let's move on here to the Kansas City Chiefs. And so with the Chiefs, he came here in 2013. So 2014 draft. Let's talk about that. He brought in, he was involved. We'll say involved. I don't want to say this was all Brett Veach, but he was involved in, D Ford, Phillip Gaines, DeAnthony Thomas, Tardif. I'd love to say his whole name, but it's pretty difficult to do that. But that's really, in my mind, it wasn't a great draft, but there's 3 starters in the NFL on this list, and one of them still plays with Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know about DeAnthony Thomas. What's going on with the DeAnthony Thomas?
He's a free agent right now. He hasn't been picked up with anybody yet.
Okay, so with that being said, regardless if they are on the Chiefs or not, we do have 2 that we know for sure, and D Ford and Tardif, who's still with the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's really not a bad way to start off. And that was under GM, Dorsey, was it?
Yeah, that was Dorsey.
So what did you think of that 2014 draft?
Well, it was a good draft. And when I say good, you have to look at the players that were brought in. And with their time in Kansas City, you have to look at their contributions. And DeAnthony Thomas, when healthy, he was a very good slot receiver for us. Last year, we saw, prior to the injury, we saw his ability to contribute on special teams as well. I mean, he was a special teams ace for us last year, up until the injury. The way that he could fly down and just cover the kicks and tackle the returner rather quickly was phenomenal. It's just unfortunate that we ended up ultimately losing him to injury. If he had stayed healthy, I think he could have been a major contributor on special teams as well as in the slot.
Which would have been great for the Kansas City Chiefs, but honestly, where we're at right now, I'm not missing DeAnthony Thomas too much. So the 2014 draft was a decent one, but 2015 in my mind up until now is when we've really, really picked up steam and dug some amazing talent out of the NFL draft. So 2015, look, we got Marcus Peters, Mitch Morris, Chris Conley, and Nunez Roches. That is 4 solid players out of one draft, and that's really hard to do for any franchise. But hone in on this 2015 draft for the Chiefs. Obviously, Marcus Peters and Morris, Conley, and Roches, all 4 starters. Kick off with it.
Yeah, so you had major talent, major contributions. Peters was coming off of some college personnel issues at Washington, and we took a flyer on him, and we were willing to take a chance. And talent-wise, the man is awesome. But you look at his off-the-field character, personality stuff, and I mean, as time told, it was just way too much to keep around. It was too much of a quote-unquote locker room cancer.
And I think it was a good deal that we cut ties with Marcus Peters. And it was, that was kind of a weird thing. I think everybody in Chiefs Kingdom was at shock when it happened because nobody saw it coming. But then when you thought about it just a little bit deeper, there wasn't a part of you that didn't understand why.
No, absolutely. It made too much sense. And as we I mean, to jump ahead, you look at the draft compensation that we got for him, with the second rounder this year. I mean, it really paid off dividends. I think we got some fantastic talent there in Thornhill.
Yeah, absolutely. Dude, I can't wait for this draft class. So let's stick here with the 2015 here real quick. Look, Mitch Morse obviously is parted ways with the Kansas City Chiefs, but made huge contributions in Kansas City. Chris Conley also parted ways. But look, they're going to other starting roles in other teams and going to make huge contributions. Nunez Roches, he is still a Kansas City Chief, correct?
No, Nunez Roches, I believe, was released or traded last year.
Okay, I couldn't remember that. Okay, so look, still though, the 2015 draft was great for the Kansas City Chiefs, and the 2016 draft, didn't let us down either. I would hold it to that level, probably even higher, because in 2016, look, Chris Jones, Tyreek Hill, and Demarcus Robinson. Break that down. Look, try to break down that draft, 2016.
Oh, man. Well, with your first pick in the draft coming in the second round, you take Chris Jones, who comes in and ends up being a tremendous talent, a very effective defensive end, defensive tackle, who pressures the quarterback and controls the offensive line the way that he did, was amazing. That's a first round talent. Who are the other players? I'm sorry.
You have Chris Jones, Demarcus Robinson, and Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, so D-Rob comes in, and he's a great combination of size and speed. He had a little bit of issues coming out of, I believe it was Florida, as far as route running. And then we find a hidden gem in the 5th round, 6th round with Tyreek Hill. Well, another extremely fast guy who had character concerns coming out of college. And performance-wise, Tyreek Hill ends up jumping D-Rob and becomes a essentially perennial All-Pro or Pro Bowl player.
And I think he might even be a once-in-a-generation type of player. So, look, we're really honing in on some extremely huge talent brought to you by Brett-Veach. Come on, Chris Jones and Tyreek Hill in the same draft. That's absolutely amazing. So, look, the first 3 years, we're sitting here looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 starters for the Kansas City Chiefs, and the first 3 years of Brett-Veach being involved in our organization. So let's go to 2017. You think all of that sounds good? You think 2014 through 2016 sounds good? How about 2017? We went and got Patrick Mahomes, K-Pass, Kareem Hunt, and Oligwe. How about that draft? Break that one down, because, hey, I don't know if we have enough time, but do your best to try to shorten up that draft.
Man, okay, so I think anybody who was paying attention rather closely to the draft knew that after the fact that Brett-Veach was essentially the brainchild to go out and get Patrick Mahomes. All throughout the prior year, he was planting the bug in Andy Reid's ear. Check out this kid from Texas Tech. Check out Mahomes. Check out Mahomes. And as the draft got closer, the combine happened. Mahomes started getting on people's radar, and people were kind of projecting Mahomes to us at the end of the first round. And when the Chiefs traded up to, I believe it was 11, a lot of people were looking at the quarterback position and saying, okay, Chiefs trade up, they're going to get their quarterback, they're going to take Deshaun Watson. And I remember seeing this video clip of Gruden saying they're going to take Mahomes. And sure enough, we get Mahomes, and I think a lot of people were sleeping on Mahomes or just didn't really know about who he was going into that draft. I was ecstatic that we got him.
I was too.
And then knowing that he was going to have to sit a year behind Alex Smith, it could not have been a better situation for him to sit and learn.
It was a dream come true for the Kansas City Chiefs. And honestly, look, with Patrick Mahomes, look, that's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And then so we go get a Patrick Mahomes. Then we turn around and we get Kareem Hunt. Nobody saw that coming. And look, I hate to see what happened to Kareem Hunt. And the kid's a good kid. Obviously, he did what he did with Kansas City. I'm not really going to touch into that. But if it was not for that, that is probably the best Kansas City Chiefs draft of all time is 2017. Because look, let's be honest. With the Kansas City Chiefs and our franchise, we didn't dig much up out of the draft for about 20 years. We got Derek Thomas, and then the Chiefs fell off forever as far as drafts. So now we're coming back here, from starting in 2013, and we're absolutely killing the draft. Killing it. And that's not even to mention K-Pass.
Absolutely.
Not even mention K-Pass.
Yeah, and he's a player who really gets overlooked a lot. And you have to look at his situation. He does have some players and some talent in front of him. And, yes, it's his responsibility to rise above. But the dude's 6'7", I believe 280, 285, extremely athletic and long for his size. And when he does get to play, that guy can get after that quarterback in ways that we haven't seen in a long time. I mean, even Justin Houston, he didn't hit with that kind of power. And I think it was earlier this year, I think it was like week 3, week 4, K-Pass was able to drive into the quarterback, and with the quote-unquote new rules to protect the quarterback, he ended up getting flagged for roughing the passer. But I think everybody who saw the play thought that it was a clean hit. And it was a monster hit. And I would really like to see him get some more playing time.
And I'm sure that he will, even given all the talent that we're bringing in. And look, let's stay on that side of the ball, because 2018 was obviously a defense-heavy draft. This draft is still questionable for me and obviously Kansas City. But here was the thing: is this was a Braylon Speaks, Derek Nottie, Dorian O'Daniel, Armani Watson, and Tremon Smith draft. And I'm not sure if this draft is still being orchestrated and was planned into our defensive scheme change. I think that it is, because it just doesn't make sense for the progression of all of our drafts under Veach for that one to be so shaky the way it is, because there's really, besides Nottie, I'm not really impressed. Take off with that, Chris.
Well, there's a lot of talent there that still needs to develop. And that draft class is going through something that's pretty difficult. Not saying that it can't happen, but they came in learning one scheme, and now the very next year they have to learn another.
Yes. So would you say that's Bob Sutton's fault?
No. Well, no, because Bob Sutton already had the 3-4 scheme established. Mm-hmm. But looking at the players that we drafted both that year and the year before, you can kind of see the vision that Veach had. He was drafting players that didn't fit the 3-4 scheme, that fit a 4-3 scheme.
Yes, and the important thing is that I think Chiefs Kingdom needs to understand, and Chris, I know you hone in on because you have a GM mindset. You can't just switch up a defensive scheme in 1 year and flip your entire personnel around and say, hey, we have a new scheme. That's like having a business that you've run a product for the last decade, and then the next day switching it up to a different product and saying, okay, it's time to learn this. It's not something, it's not something that is going to happen overnight, and it's a progressive thing. And Chris, you made a good point that that's what we've been watching the last few years.
Absolutely. And if you go back, it even started all the way back in 2015. as far as when he was starting to make those moves in that switch. But I mean, we really saw it really begin 2 years ago, and then last year for sure. I mean, essentially taking a defensive player with every pick is nearly unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
But and at the time, I think a lot of people were kind of looking at it like, okay, we know that our defense needs help, but wow, that was kind of crazy. Nobody has ever really done that. But now we look back at it and say, hey, that makes so much sense. Veach already knew he was going to be making this move.
Right, and that's the biggest thing about all of this, and that's really why we're, touching base so much on Brett-Veach today, is because we want Chiefs Kingdom to understand his vision and why he's doing what he's doing. It's bigger than this year and last year and next year. I mean, this guy has a vision probably for the next 10 years, and they probably have it written out on paper. So and that's what the NFL is all about. So let's fast forward a little bit to this year's draft, which is these are products we really haven't seen yet, but the excitement level is just as high for the 2019 that it has been, in the last 3 or 4 years. So let's look at these players: Mecole Hardman, Juan Thornhill, Kalen Sanders, Darwin Thompson. I'm going to start off with Mecole Hardman, 4.34, 4.3 40. With light, he's lightning fast. He's quick and fast. Great hands. Juan Thornhill possibly could be Defensive Rookie of the Year. I don't want to overstep my boundaries there, but that's the type of talent we're looking at. And Kalen Saunders, I'm going to let Kris-Chavez touch base on that. But go ahead and fire off of 2019. What do you see there?
Man, okay, so... Well, and you left out one player that we drafted in the 7th round, I believe. But every player that we drafted, minus the 6th round cornerback Fenton, and every single one of those players could potentially progress into a starting role. Mm-hmm. Fenton, I don't see him ever necessarily becoming a starter. I could see him becoming a slot cornerback at his peak, at his best. But, I mean, it's going to take a couple years for him to get there. Colin Saunders, an extremely agile defensive tackle, especially given his size. I mean, if anybody out there has seen any of his highlights, you've probably caught him doing some backflips and whatnot all over the field. The guy's just a tremendous specimen. But then also that he's a huge character guy, because for the Senior Bowl, he flew back home to be present at his child's birth, and then flew back for the Senior Bowl to participate. And, I mean, that says a lot about his character, but also his desire to play.
Very true. He understands the bigger picture as well. I like the depth that we're truly bringing in here in 2019. And I feel like, outside of 2017, this might be one of the best drafts for the Chiefs as well, because the excitement level in Kansas City after, OTAs and you're going into mandatory mini camps, the excitement with Mecole Hardman and Juan Thornhill and Kalen Saunders is through the roof. And that's something that we're kind of getting used to here in Chiefs Kingdom. But I don't want us to, you got to stay humble about it. I see fans picking Brett-Veach apart and saying, well, I think he choked with Dorian O'Daniel, or why isn't Armani Watts working out, or whatever. They're not all going to be perfect. Not every single pick is going to land. This is almost like a lottery, but you're doing your research and expecting this player to come into a franchise and perform just off of film and meeting him. I mean, it's a sale,
Well, and in addition to that, you also have to take into consideration that no position, no player is irreplaceable, minus Pat Mahomes. But you can always look at every position on the roster and say, can we get better here?
Yes.
And for Veach to look at Armani Watts, who he just drafted last year, and then towards the end of the season, he was showing some promise. Oh, no, not the end of the season, the end of his season before he got injured. He was showing some promise. He started to kind of show that he had the ability to be a major contributor.
Right.
But then you look at this year's draft, second pick that the Chiefs have, they take another seat. And that's with us already having brought in Tyrann Mathieu. And to have now 3 cornerbacks that can potentially step in at any given time and start and be a major contributor, that's fantastic. That's tremendous depth.
Yes.
Which is what any team would love to have.
Yes.
And yeah, there's still a couple positions that we didn't address that we would have liked to have earlier in the draft, especially those of you guys who saw the franchise earlier this week, episode number 2, who they were looking at cornerback earlier in the draft. But with the trade for Frank Clark, that kind of negated our ability to really get that cornerback that we wanted at the back end of the first round. And then just however the draft worked out, we didn't really find our guy until the 6th round. But we also brought in an undrafted free agent, Mark Fields, who looks to be a tremendous talent. We just need for him to be able to be consistent and play the way that he's capable of doing all the time.
Right, and look, we're digging talent, like you said, out of the undrafted pool as well. So, and that's something that I personally haven't really got to see a lot of. So that's more down your alley, Chris. But I like what we have going on here in the 2019 draft. And yes, the cornerbacks were really the 2 cornerbacks we honed in on were taken off earlier in the board. And 2019 NFL draft, and that's why we kind of shifted gears and went and got McCole Hartman. But look, what we're going to end this here with Brett Veach, and this is what I want to say about Brett. Number 1, Pat Mahomes was Brett Veach's guy. Everything that is Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City is strictly because of Brett Veach. Just like Marty Schottenheimer, Derek Thomas. That was Marty's draft pick. Derek Thomas was Marty's draft pick. That's going to be the same as Pat Mahomes, Brett Veach. That's Brett Veach's draft pick. And that's legendary by itself. Legendary by itself. Now, here's the thing. Brett Veach still scouts players at the pro and collegiate levels for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's not just the general manager. All of these positions in this front office coexist, and they all collaborate, and they know how to make it one. And they all know each other's jobs, which is the best thing because everybody knows what everybody is looking for. So you're getting the best out of everybody every given second. And I love that. It's a great scheme that we have going on in Kansas City, and we need to hold on to it. Trust the front office. I've said this before. I know Chris feels that way too. Trust the front office. We have produced 12 starters in the last 4 or 5 years for the Kansas City Chiefs. And then even the guys who weren't starters were major contributors, and that's not including the 2019 draft, which we haven't seen yet. So look, let's be honest. In 15 years, through the 90s and then into mid-2000s, I might even say late 2000s, between 2000 and 2010, we didn't pull 12 starters out of the NFL draft. And we have done it here in the last 5 years. So Brett Veach, in my mind, is the man in Kansas City. Would you agree, Chris?
No, absolutely.
I could not imagine if we were to get rid of Brett Veach, who would we go get? I don't even want to think about that. That's not a thought. That's not even an option. That's just like trading Patrick Mahomes. Something's not going to happen. But look, that is our segment on Brett Veach, and I felt it was important for Chiefs Kingdom to know why we have Brett Veach, exactly what he's done and what he brings to the table, and what he's looking at for the future of the Kansas City Chiefs. So,
Richard, if I could add one thing real quick, man.
Yeah.
Okay. So another thing to also keep in mind is that Veach and Reed have been working together since 2004, and at this point in their careers, they know each other really well. Veach knows exactly the type of players that Reed wants on his team and the abilities that they need to have and that Reed will be happy with. And to have that sort of relationship between a GM and a head coach is nearly unheard of. But we're also able to witness now how the dividends of that relationship. And, I mean, like you were kind of alluding to, if Veach goes, who do we bring in that's going to be able to identify talent the way that Veach currently is? I mean, we had Pioli, Dorsey, and Peterson beforehand, and these guys were getting lucky if they found any talent. And one player, two players in a draft. Veach has identified multiple players in every draft that he has had his hands on that become major contributors. And it's not just the first rounds, it's the back end of the rounds as well, the undrafted free agents.
It's amazing to see him go to work, and it truly is artwork. And look, Chiefs Kingdom, this is a very well-oiled machine that is legitly turning into a powerhouse for years to come. We're in a transition, and this transition could not go any better. I mean, if anybody is questioning anything that the Chiefs are doing, look, you really need to take a look at your football knowledge, because it's just, this is exciting. And not only, there's a lot, look, the Chiefs are getting a lot of coverage that they haven't got in the last 25 to 30 years. And Chris, look, I'm going to start off a new segment here of our show, and we're going to do this as every show, and we'll kind of go back and forth. So, I don't know if Chris brought anything to the table tonight, but we're going to call this the no-look pass. And so me and Chris want to ask each other a question every show called the no-look pass, and kind of catch each other off guard, so you can get our genuine football knowledge and how we feel from the heart and it not be scripted. So, with the no-look pass tonight, Chiefs Kingdom, I'm sure that you have checked out the franchise on KansasCityChiefs.com. There's been 2 episodes. Episode 2 came out the other evening. There was a lot of talk about the draft, and this is a really good time to bring up the franchise because it honed in on Brett-Veach as well, and it also honed in on the drafting of McCole Hartman, and they kind of showed that whole process with Derek Nottie and going down to Florida State and all that. Touch base on that, Chris. Do you like the franchise? Do you like what the Kansas City Chiefs are doing with that? Because this is something new in Chiefs Kingdom. I feel like this is something they do with the Lakers or the Patriots or something. But that should tell Kansas City, look, we have something to be excited about, even outside, with football, just with the things that they're doing with cinematography with the Chiefs. Tell me what you think of the franchise.
I think overall, it's great to be able to kind of get behind the scenes and see what Veach does, how he has his hands involved in everything. Kind of got to see a little bit of Clark Hunt there as well. Some of the scouts, what they do when they go to the scouting combine in Indianapolis, what their daily life is like. The first episode to me kind of felt a little bit more kind of like a hype video that we would have seen going into the season, like on Twitter or something.
Right.
The second episode, I think, was, and granted, like, it's a little bit more my wheelhouse, but it was all about the draft and bringing players in, how we welt and dealt for Frank Clark, and then seeing him come in middle of the night, early morning, and there's Chiefs fans who are out there in the cold, in the dark, to welcome him. That really showed just how into this team the fans are, but also it showed Clark, like, hey, we are dedicated. This is what we're about, and we love you coming in day one, man, and it's going to be the same way the entire time that you're here.
And I love that. Look, it's the Chiefs' way of getting Chiefs Kingdom involved in as much of the aspect of every part of the franchise as they can. And I think that we should feel fortunate that we have moved in that direction and that we have a team that, that we want to cover like that. Obviously, look, we're not going to go out there and have an Elvis Gerbach-led team and, and let's be honest, and do things like this. It's not even worth it. But the excitement level's so high, why not get Chiefs Kingdom involved in every way possible? And also, look, Brett-Veach, that really showed Kansas City about Brett-Veach. I've been hearing a lot about Brett-Veach. There you go, Kansas City. If you have not watched the franchise on kansascitychiefs.com, episode 2 just came out. I would start now. Catch up. It's really, 30, 40 minutes a piece, something like that. It's not too much, to sit down and watch. Check it out. Get involved. It's getting you involved in the franchise. So, moving on. That was our no-look pass. Hey, I really like that, and Chris will continue doing that. And look, we're going to challenge each other from here on out. That was just kind of the start of things, and I really wanted Chiefs Kingdom to get involved in the franchise on kansascitychiefs.com. So let's move on to the season preview. We are in week 5 of the regular season. This is a dome game versus the Indianapolis-Colts. Here's my thing. Me and Chris had touched base on, had the Chiefs played in many dome games since Patrick Mahomes has been the starter, and I don't think that they have. But if you all remember, Hill torched Atlanta in that preseason game in Atlanta when Mahomes had that 75-yard throw that went viral all over the place. I look for the Chiefs to be able to do that again. What do you need in a dome? Speed. Why? Because there's no elements that you have to worry about. And that's the big thing with Patrick Mahomes. His confidence level without elements, I'm sure, is absolutely through the roof. I'm sure he's dying to play in a dome. Chris, take off on that. And what are your thoughts on Mahomes and our speed playing in a dome against another speedy team that's kind of a marathon type of team? They've got a decent defense, questionable in my mind, and a pretty powerful offense.
Okay, so I'm going to call the Colts the Chiefs North because they have several former Chiefs as well as a former Chief in their front office as well in Chris Ballard. Mm-hmm. They brought in Justin Houston and Spencer Ware this offseason, and they also have Dottie Nicholas, who's also a former Chief as well on their roster. But overall, the Colts knew that they had to get better at wide receiver. With Luck coming back from his shoulder injury the year prior, and all that they really had was T.Y. Hilton. They needed to add some more bodies there. And so they brought in Devin Funchess from the Panthers. They drafted Paris Campbell in the second round of the draft. Paris Campbell was their only offensive pick in the entire draft. Every other pick that they made was on the defensive side of the ball. And so for me, that tells me that they knew that their biggest talent deficiency was on the defensive side of the ball. They had I believe he was the rookie or defensive rookie of the year in Leonard last year, who led the team with 111 solo tackles, 52 assisted for a total of 163 tackles. The next closest tackler on the team was 58 tackles behind him.
Wow. Hey, that's a motor right there.
No, absolutely. They had a safety in Gathers, who plays more like a linebacker. They have Malik Hooker, who's usually played more like as a single back safety. If they come at us with that sort of a look with a single back safety, Mahomes is putting up a career night.
Yes, I completely agree. Here's my thing. Okay, the Colts are definitely transitioning and trying to get their defense better, and it is getting a little better. We have a quarterback in Andrew Luck, who was a comeback player of the year last year. He really had a great season. We have a running back in Marlon Mack, and they also brought in Spencer Ware. Marlon Mack had 900 rushing yards and 10 starts last season. So I really look for him to kind of step things up, and especially if Spencer Ware can come in there and make some noise. They probably have a pretty sound running game. Like you said, they brought in Campbell, and they still have T.Y. Hilton. Don't overlook that tight end position either. Eric Ebron, that guy should have a breakout season this year with the Colts, I would assume. And then defensive end Justin Houston, like you were saying. They've got some talent, and you're right. It looks like a Chiefs 2.0, but in the starting aspects, like they're just getting it off the ground. Can they beat the Chiefs? No. Can they, especially in a dome? And that sounds bad for the Indianapolis Colts. It's worse to play the Chiefs at your home stadium than it probably is to go to Arrowhead. And Arrowhead obviously is Arrowhead, but put Mahomes and Hartman and Hill and Watkins and Kelsey in a dome and watch us light up the scoreboard. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, this is going to be. I'm going to put this game a little bit closer to the Rams game as far as really neck and neck. The Colts are a rather underrated team. Their offensive line has the ability to be one of the best lines and that we've seen probably in the last 2 decades. They went through a 7-game stretch last season where they only gave up 2 sacks. And during that stretch, Luck had a QBR average of over 90 and a rating in the 120s.
Wow.
And during the second half of the season, the Colts turned things around because they had a really rough start. They turned things around and won 9 of their last 10 games. They're extremely hot, and in the offseason, they only got better.
So we'll see what happens here with the Colts. This could be a bigger matchup in Week 5 than a lot of us want to believe here before the season starts. And you are right. The Colts really took off last year. And in my mind, Andrew Luck had a career year. That was really a benchmark of him turning things around after all the struggles that he went through, the past 2 or 3 seasons before that. So let's get into predictions for this game because this very well could turn into a foot race. But for me, I look at it as the Chiefs defense steps up. This is going to be one of those games that is really, really going to show Kansas City, what we did with our defense in the offseason. I still think it's going to be a closer game, but I don't want to say as big of a foot race like you're saying, LA and Kansas City, but I'm going to say Kansas City wins this game, 41-28. It's not going to be terribly close, but they're going to make us go full throttle the whole game.
No, absolutely. This is going to be the type of game where you have to capitalize on every possession. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to score every time, but you also have to play the field position game. And hopefully Colquitt isn't called on all that often, but when he is, we know that he can pin the Colts back. Kind of like you, I kind of expect this game to be within reason, score-wise. I'd probably go 42-28 on that one. So, we're absolutely same ballpark there. And the other thing I just want to throw out there, because we were kind of talking about it in the last, or 2 segments ago, one of those cornerbacks that we were looking at in the franchise, taken in the first round, Rock Ya-Sin, he was drafted by the Colts.
Very true. Very true. And that is a player who can make an immediate impact on the Colts defense.
Yeah, and one other thing I just want to throw out there is in preseason, we need to keep an eye on these guys. Especially their cornerback group. They're extremely deep in that position. And if we don't feel comfortable with our cornerbacks and the Colts let somebody go, we could potentially pick up one of their guys.
Which would be great because we would love that depth. Now let's look at this. Let's look at a complete season for Indy. What's your prediction for Indianapolis for the whole season? I personally look at them as winning their division and advancing into the playoffs. They could potentially be one of those teams that can grab the 3rd spot in the playoffs.
They're definitely a playoff caliber team, but in their division, they're going to have a rough go against the Texans. You got Deshaun Watson with hopefully a healthy J.J. Watt. And, I mean, those guys are going to be able to compete with them next year. I think the Colts end up being a wild card team. But just because they're a wild card team doesn't necessarily mean that they won't win that first game in the first round, or that wild card game. They could win and make a run deep into the playoffs.
I think they have the chance to, and that division might be at one of the better points that it has been in the last 10 years. I mean, it's usually one team or the other just running away with it. So I think it'll be nice to see some competition in that division as well, which will also give Indy a little bit more edge, playing a team in their division that's actually got, any type of talent. It's been an up and down road for that division, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, and their division is rather similar to how the AFC West has been over the last umpteen years, where you have a very deep rivalry you could be the Raiders. There's a 1-15 team, but when you play anybody else in that division, and those Raiders, they're going to play you like they are undefeated.
Yes.
And they're going to play you extremely tough. And in those sort of situations, in those rivalry games, that makes you that much tougher. And so that when you come out and you make it into the playoffs, you're already battle-tested. And a lot of these other divisions don't have that deep of a rivalry and hatred amongst one another, healthy hatred, that gets them ready for the playoffs. We have that in the AFC West, and at least between the Texans and Colts right now, I think that seeing those two play against each other gets them ready for the playoffs. But they need for the Jaguars and whoever the heck else is in their conference to really step up.
Yes, and I agree, because it is your divisional play. You need your teams in your division to be good. You want your division to be tough, and known as a tough division in football, because it really is the foundation that sets you up to be a formidable force in the playoffs. So with that being said, we have talked about the season preview. Week 5, Indianapolis Colts, Dome. Okay, watch out for Indy. But this is a dome game. You put Patrick Mahomes on the field with the speed that we have with no elements. I don't think that there's any possible way for the Colts to keep up. And Chris agrees with me there. It is just one of those things that you're going to be in a track meet with Kansas City in this game, and there's not really a team in the NFL, maybe one or two, that can keep up, and the Indianapolis Colts are not one of those teams. So I do want to touch base on one more thing before we end the broadcast today. The AFC West has been a deep tradition for years and years and years, and there have been some landmark owners that really set the pace for the NFL that come out of the AFC West, and they really are pioneers of football. And look, we are all human here. Look, I know none of us in Chiefs Kingdom like the Denver Broncos. I'm not a Denver Broncos fan myself, and I never will be. But we depend on the Denver Broncos, like we just said, to be successful every year to make the AFC West what it is. And unfortunately, the owner, Pat Bowlen, of the Denver Broncos has passed away. He really was the last pioneer owner out of the AFC West. It really is a sad day in football, and you never want to see that. So, with that being said, rest in peace, Pat Bowlen. My sincere regards are to the Broncos and their fans and the family of Pat Bowlen. So rest in peace, but I want to touch base on that because the AFC West, there's a lot of tradition there, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what color you wear. Hey, this is the AFC West, and you got to show some love. So, Chris, I appreciate you coming on today. It's always fun talking football with you, and today was a really fun one for me. What do you think, bud?
I just wanted to throw out a real quick cheers to Pat Bowlen. I'm tipping my Kansas City cup to you. And, yeah, man, this was a great show, great great talking with you, man. As always, love doing it.
Good deal, good deal. Well, Chiefs Kingdom, that is our show for today. It was great having you. You enjoy the rest of your weekend. It's Saturday. Go out and have a drink. Enjoy some barbecue. You got another day to rest up, so you might as well get it in today. So, Kansas City, I appreciate you listening. Have a great weekend. From the Kansas City Sports Update Studio, this is the Richard Smith Show, where we talk about all things Kansas City Chiefs, brought to you by Arrowhead Update. Check us out on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Spreaker, CastBox, YouTube, Player FM, and all third-party applications. Check out The Richard Smith Show on Facebook platforms such as Arrowhead Update and Kansas City Sports Update. And if you cannot find us there, just Google or search The Richard Smith Show and Kansas City Chiefs, and I promise you will find us.